It just kills me that Trudeau is trying to, you know, shush away any criticism by calling all of this racism. Put up one of the many photos of Trudeau in blackface. Let's just have that there. So yeah, we'll definitely have a link to your website below for anyone who wants to check it out. It's really exciting to see that happen. It's scary though to think that, you know, I think in the United States we kind of take for granted the kind of freedom of speech we have and don't really understand that countries like Canada, which we tend to think of as just America without as many guns, doesn't have that same kind of free speech protection.
It doesn't. You know, that was really one of the points of my book, too. I think as Canadians, we were just taught that we are such a law-abiding, well-governed society that it would be hard to believe that you have reporters that are being threatened, just as Canadian politicians are being threatened by a foreign government that's becoming increasingly brazen and powerful on Canadian soil. And the nature of threats can relate to, you know, libel, chill, lawfare, and it can get worse. Trust me.
Right? Can you talk about some of the like who is going after you for saying the things you're saying? Like it's not just regular people or some kind of like street thugs. You're actually being essentially attacked for your speech or for what you publish by powerful people.
Yeah, for legal reasons on this point, we won't use any names, but it's stemming from my book and before. There was one individual connected to a casino. There was two individuals clearly, according to the reporting and according to the intelligence, connected to the United Front Work Department, and all that implies. We just had to look at my book's title, a network of narcos, tycoons, and CCP agents. Look, that's the United Front. So when you're reporting about those people, there can be legal risks and other kinds of risks. And now we're talking about stemming from the reports on the PRC interference, the undenied PRC interference in our last two elections. Certain politicians or you know, entities are making legal threats or legal claims, and for, you know, the reasons stated that we won't talk too much more about them now. But is this a form of you know, an attack on the public interest reporting? We have a system where these cases can be tested, and so that's you know, all I can say is all the reporting will stand the test of time and be defended. And I really do hope at the end of the day there's a conversation around how Canadians' law courts are used with investigative reporting.
So, what do you think is the Communist Party's end game in Canada?
Again, I'll refer to my first story. I put a quote in there where essentially the thrust of the story was the Trudeau government, this document that was presented to Mr. Trudeau in 2019 said, has been ignoring interference from India, Russia, and China as the top three offenders. So India, that's a new one to throw in there. Three just like gargantuan nations interfering deeply in Canada's democracy. The substance of the documents I cited in the Bureau's first story say Canada has been ignoring interference threats from diplomats from these countries because Canada values trade and foreign policy wins more than Canada's security. And one of the quotes said, China undermines freedom of speech in Canada. Now, that's just one of the very broad threats, but very simply, they don't want reporters criticizing anything to do with Beijing. They don't want elected officials. They don't want anyone in Canada to say anything negative of China. As broad as that sounds, that's the nature of it. We've heard it very recently. One of the leader of the opposition party, his name is Aaron O'Toole, stood up. This was a very big advance in understanding in Parliament, and said he was briefed belatedly by Canadian intelligence that the United Front Work Department funded a sophisticated attack on his party and his leadership This included what he called a concrete misinformation product funded by the United Front. And he said this is an attack not only on today's parliamentarians, but future parliamentarians in Canada who can't speak freely about China.
So do you think all of this has led to more awareness within the Canadian government and parliament? I mean, obviously the Trudeau part of the government was fully aware and did nothing. But, I mean, like, Eric O'Toole speaking about this, do you think these people understood what was happening before all this started to come out?
In the case of Mr. O'Toole, he understood pretty well. He was quoted in my report back in May, I believe 2020 spring, about the United Front PPE vacuum operation. But certainly Canadians and the politicians that weren't aware do now know that Canada's democracy, you can't put it in another way, is being undermined and is attacked by a few very big nations, but far and above anyone else. The Chinese Communist Party presents that deep risk to our democratic institutions.
And do you think the Canadian public is this something they're talking about? Are they aware of what the threat is?
This has been the story for since November of last year. This is the number one story in Canada, and that that's progress of a kind, because sometimes it felt like you were just shouting into the wind with these shocking truths.
I know the feeling.
Yeah, you know the feeling very well. It has been the number one story right now. It may be going into a lull, but I'm telling you, there's many, many more shocking stories to tell on this file.
Such as?
Well, look, when we're talking about influence, I remember there was my colleague spoke to someone directly involved in these police station investigations in Canada. And the quote was to the effect that, look, there are so many politicians in Canada that are either wittingly or unwittingly implicated in the United Front influence networks. And the official continued to say, the honest ones had better wake up. So I'm taking from that comment that at a high level, the RCMP believes there's a number of not honest ones. This is not just about willful blindness. This is about corruption. There are stories out there, I believe, in Canada. And while we're talking about the RCMP, I'm sure you noticed that Australia, 60 Minutes, their version did a pretty good report recently where the Five Eyes law enforcement heads came together and said, oh, now we're saying what Sam Cooper's book said. The Chinese Communist Party is working together with organized crime. We saw the RCMP commissioner say that our federal force is seeing connections from organized crime right up to the Chinese state. So look, I felt, okay, I've said something first, and now we have Canada's top law enforcement official saying it.